When we consider the Dominion, it is both simultaneously an apathetic and brutal authoritarian regime. After the destruction of the USS Odyssey, the Dominion would not make many known moves against the Federation for a while. In fact, we wouldn't see the Dominion again until the Federation sent what it would claim to be its first ship of war into the Gamma Quadrant. Because nothing says respecting a government's territory like sneaking in with a ship specifically made to fight and kill those who oppose you. As has been stated, after the destruction of the USS Odyssey, there wasn't a lot that occurred. Generally, each season in DS9 is considered to be a year, so if we keep with that convention, it will be roughly a little shy of a full year since the loss of the Odyssey. However, even though it seemed like the Dominion wasn't an immediate threat, investigating what they were up to was vital. They would need to find some way to investigate who the founders were and make contact with them. To accomplish this goal, Starfleet opted to recommission the USS Defiant, bringing it out of mothballs. This ship would be classified as a, wait for it, Defiant-class vessel, and it was originally designed to defeat and kill the Borg. I've done no less than 2 videos on both the USS Defiant specifically and the Defiant class. I'm going to look back at those videos and determine if they withstand the test of time, and if they do, I'll simply add them to the lore series. If not, I'll redo them. Regardless, both videos are linked below. However, in this discussion, I more want to break down the idea of sending the Defiant for this envoy of peace. Remember, Starfleet had sent what it considered to be the most powerful ship it had available. That vessel was destroyed, something that probably shocked other Alpha and Beta Quadrant powers, if we're thinking about it. So then, Starfleet decides to send a modern ship that was designed for war. The introduction of the Defiant provides both a continuity tie-in and a continuity inconsistency. Ironically, the ship leads back to the Next Generation, where they discuss creating vessels and new weapons to fight the Borg that weren't ready at the time. But it's inconsistent in that Starfleet did have ships of war. Anyone who says that Starfleet didn't hasn't watched Undiscovered Country. They quite clearly discuss the dismantling of the battle fleet while exploration and scientific divisions would remain in place. This, leading to its very logical conclusion, would mean that Starfleet had ships of war. You can even see it reflected in the original series television show. It could be argued that these ships may have been more akin to that of olden times, where governments would have naval battleships that did double duty, but they were battleships. That said, I do know what the writers were going for. At this point, Deep Space Nine was still keeping with the TNG retcon that Starfleet was never really a military power. This given most likely that you had a new generation that grew up with TNG and not the original series. I can really see why they would do this. But that aside, the more interesting piece is the idea that Starfleet would send a cloaked warship into Dominion space to talk. To get it out of the way, this would have been an excellent time to utilize the Phase Cloak as a top secret option versus the Romulan Star Empire's tech. That way, there wouldn't be guys like me that are going to rip this to shreds in future videos, and I wouldn't have to note about anything, and I would just go so crazy with how they kept continuity together. It would help especially when I discuss the Romulan Star Empire and their quote-unquote alliance with the Dominion, or at least non-aggression treaty. Though, to be fair, I have an interesting conspiracy theory on why they would have a Romulan Star Empire cloak and the Romulans not care. We'll talk about that a little later. Let's consider the original premise though. They are taking the Defiant, cloaked, into Dominion space to locate the Founders. From the Dominion standpoint, after the destruction and removal of all Alpha and Beta Quadrant powers from the Gamma Quadrant, they now become aware of alliances between the Alpha and Beta powers. The Romulans, hostile at best with the Federation, are now providing a government they consider an enemy? Cloaking devices. And this enemy is using that tech to get into Dominion territory without detection. This presents a very clear and present danger, if not a justification for why the belief that the Alpha and Beta Quadrants should be conquered. Additionally, Starfleet is specifically bribing member states of the Dominion in order to find the Founders. They get information from a client state, hack Dominion technology, and make for the coordinates of the Dominion's power base. If we reversed this situation, it would be considered a vast conspiracy. If the Cardassian Union were trying to buy off Beta Z to get vital information on Starfleet and Federation assets, and then use information gained to hack and gain coordinates from an unmanned Starfleet satellite, this would be something that would be required to be stopped. It would be a huge deal. But because it's the Dominion on the receiving end, that's okay apparently. I bring up this incursion to really point out one thing. As I've been presenting this, it's been painting a very bad picture of the Federation. I have noticed that there has been some scoffing at future writing when the Romulans and other powers decide to ally with the Dominion. But if you consider how everything right now looks, being allies with the Dominion, or at least not fighting the Dominion, seems like a good idea. The Dominion propaganda machine would be pumping out this information far and wide. Starfleet definitively looks like the aggressor here, but I think there's possibly more to this. Starfleet, and indeed the Federation, are acting wildly out of character. Generally, they would send peace envoys, ambassadors, not ships of war. We'll discuss my thoughts and more on how this all could have been a Dominion ploy after this. Hey Lore Masters, if you like watching the Lore Reloaded and wanted to support the channel, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Lore Reloaded. Utilize PayPal to give a one-time donation or monthly donations by clicking on the link in the description, or buy a fancy shirt from TeePublic. This month's shirt is the Lore Masters War Canoe. Tell the world how much the Oberth sucks by wearing the true Lore Masters War Canoe shirt. Link is in the description. Now let's get back into it. So after all of these discussions of Starfleet's intrusion into Dominion space and only deepening what would become the Dominion Cold War, there are a couple of questions that are left. First, as has been noted, these interactions are wholly inconsistent with the modus operandi of the Federation and Starfleet. Now it could be that the Admiralty are running scared. To quote Sisko, desperate times, desperate measures. But the Romulans giving cloaking technology to Starfleet is insanely unlikely, even at this point. The Romulans covet their technology, and this would have been something thought unthinkable. However, we do know that the Dominion would already have its tendrils within the Romulan Star Empire and the Cardassian Union at this point. So, what if it's the case that the Dominion's influence within the Federation and the Romulan Star Empire pushed all of this? That changelings ensured that an agreement would be brokered between the Star Empire and Starfleet to give a cloaking device. Then the changelings pushed for the recommissioning of a warship, and the Defiant would enter into Dominion territory. The Defiant would then be captured, and this would allow the Dominion to not only test the crew of the Defiant to see if they'd be willing for a takeover, but to study and analyze the technology of Starfleet. Remember, the Dominion did have the USS Defiant for an extended period of time. They know all of its secrets. This would allow them to get a real good look at what Starfleet thought would be a good match against their technology. The only real hiccup was that when the founders decided to let them go due to Odo's request, though they would still have all of the information that they had garnered. Additionally, the Tal Shiar, realizing that they had been tricked and that the Federation now had a cloaking device, might have decided to classify and kill off anyone that was involved in those negotiations. This would explain the disappearance of the Romulan officer and how the Romulans never brought it up, because officially, they never gave a cloak to Starfleet. All of this is of course theory, but that's my best take on how the operations got off the ground and why it's never brought up again. So with that out of the way, we'll discuss the failed attack on the Dominion homeworld and a Starfleet that will stand back and allow genocide to happen to ensure they survive. And you thought Discovery lacked morals.